High school sports have come a long way. It has quickly evolved into a mainstream sport and has garnered much of the local spotlight. Given the high level of play not only throughout the tri-state area but across the nation, high school football has hit the big time. Covered almost as closely as the college and pro games, there is a greater market for high school football more than ever before. Today we will get to look into the rapidly growing world of high school sports and talk with a local expert to share with us some insider knowledge. Mostly in part to the high demand for high school sports. Mike Quick has been covering high school sports in the tri-state area since 1986 and has been an integral part of the growth of the media attention in high school sports. He got his start at News 12 Connecticut, where he was first a sideline reporter. However, it wasn't until Mike worked side by side with Greg Gumbel and Al Tratwig at MSG Network that he burst onto the local high school sports scene. Since then, Mike has been a host and reporter for MSG's New Balance High School, presented by Max Preps. His weekly show covers all of New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut high school football.
Thank you for joining us for a very special edition of Person to Person. Today, our guest is an expert in local high school sports. I'd like for you to meet Mike Quick. Hi, Mike. How are you?
Good, Erica. How are you?
Good to meet you.
Great to meet you, too.
So, I think we can get right into it.
Let's let it rip. Here we go.
All right. So, Mike, when did you first realize that sports journalism was in your future?
Fourth grade, about 4 minutes away from here at Brookside School on Highland Avenue, just up the road here. And it was my teacher, Mrs. Fontaine. I was talking to my buddy Tommy Hall about Dr. J. He had a great game the night before, and I was disruptive in class, and she said, Mike, if you want to talk about sports, then why don't you just become a sportscaster? And I looked up, I was in the fourth row, and I looked out to Mrs. Fontaine. I said, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to be a sportscaster. And I told that story on WFAN radio probably about 11 or 12 years ago, and I had no idea. She never knew. And her husband was driving in his car listening to WFAN radio. And he said that when he heard his wife's name mentioned on WFAN radio, he almost drove off the road. I got a call from her the next day. She was retiring that year. Yeah. She asked me would I come back and speak to her class. I went back to the classroom, sat in the desk that she yelled at me at.
You fit.
And I fit. Yeah, I wouldn't fit there now. And that was it. So Mrs. Fontaine is the reason I got this thing started.
You owe it all to her.
Absolutely.
Now, did you actually play high school sports yourself?
Yeah, I went to Central Catholic in Norwalk. It is now closed. It's All Saints School. I was a baseball and a football player, better baseball player. I was way too heavy during football season, so I dropped a lot of weight and had a pretty good senior year in baseball, so that worked out.
Okay, and how did you get your start in the business?
I have always been one of those guys who, when I would read the Norwalk Hour or the Stamford Advocate or the Connecticut Post, the Bridgeport Post back then, I'd look at Little League box scores. It was something that was near and dear to me, and I've always liked grassroots, local high school and local sports. And it was just something, while I liked pro in college, I was fascinated with the high school stuff. And I started at News 12. I was at Sacred Heart University. I took an internship at News 12, and they opened up a sports camera position in the sports department. And I always wanted to be a sportscaster. I said, but I got to get my foot in the door. So I went in, I started as a cameraman, and I just hung around and bugged people all the time, said, let me do this, let me do that. And I was writing sportscasts, editing sportscasts when Dennis Buckman, who was then the sports director, was away on vacation. And they were bringing other people in. I was doing all the work, and they were bringing other people in. And the news director there, Tom Appleby, told me I'd never be on camera. Well, Tom, you know what? I made it, pal, so there you go.
You love those challenges.
Oh, absolutely. There's nothing like a challenge, man. When you're an athlete and You know, I tell everybody, if you've seen the show that I'm not a sportscaster. Come on, let's face it. I think I'm a coach. I think I come across as a coach on the air. I mean, you know, a lot of sportscasters are, you know, have the perfect hair, the great makeup, the beautiful clothes. That's not me. But when we sit out there, we try to tell stories, we try to be real, and I think it works. I think people enjoy it. I think they think it's a different approach to television sports. So, yeah, we're going to keep doing it until they run me out of there.
Well, I'm sure that passion comes through that you've had since childhood for it.
Yeah, that's one thing people say when they meet me. They took our show. We were speaking before we went on. January 7, 2004, they took our show off the air, and they said you couldn't sell high school sports. I said, let me sell it. And I had a meeting with my boss, and I said, I'm the most competitive person in this building, including the teams that play one floor above us, the Knicks and the Rangers. I said, I'll get us back on by the end of basketball season. And he kind of laughed. And that was all I needed. And we were back on by the end of basketball season.
Great.
So, yeah, I'm very passionate. I'm very competitive. And I believe in high school. And, you know, I tell people all the time, you turn on professional sports, they didn't start as a pro. They started in high school.
That's right.
And we feel very fortunate to be able to, you know, stop by gyms and schools and fields and cover kids. And, you know, I tell people all the time, listen, in New York, kids get on TV for all the wrong reasons. If you watch the nightly newscast, the only time a kid is mentioned, for the most part, killed somebody, murder, rape, drugs. You know what? For a half hour, once a week on MSG, feel good about kids.
Right.
And that's what we try to do.
Yeah, tell us a little bit more about the show, as well as your role there. What exactly do you do?
Well, I do a little bit of everything. I produce the show, I host the show, I sell the advertising for the show to keep us on the air. But it's not about me, and I tell this when I talk to kids all the time. You know, the people who sit in front of the camera get all the credit, and it's so unfair. It's just like a quarterback on a football team. Okay, you know what? They lead the team. But win or lose, it's not all about them. And I try to tell kids that when I speak to them at their schools in a media class that I teach in the summer, that just because you sit in front of the camera doesn't make you better than anybody else. If there's not camera people, if there's not a technical director, a producer, an audio person, a lighting, you're nobody. You're just a clown sitting in a chair looking like a doofus. So that's really what we preach. It's a team. I truly believe that our team, the high school weekly team, the Snapple Game of the Week team, we have the best teams at the Garden. And we get after it because in order to make high school work in the New York metropolitan area, you can't treat it like it's just a yuckity yuck, here's a couple highlights. If you've seen our games, they're as good as anything that's put on television in New York. And I'm talking about Jets, Giants, Knicks, Rangers. I'll put our crew up against anybody in the television business, and we will be there right to the end, if not win it at the end, because that's how strongly they've kind of taken on my role that, you know, everybody does games, but we do one a week, and every game is our Super Bowl. And I think that's why it works. I really do.
That's great.
Yeah.
The best thing I can say about coaching is the ability to compete and get players to develop into better players, push them along. But the most rewarding part of coaching for me is the fact that down the road, I run into my ex-players and they always say, Coach, you know what? You showed me something and you taught me something that I'll take with the rest of my life. Sports in general, with any sport in high school, just keeps the kids disciplined, out of trouble. It's a good motivating factor. Also, the ability to take it into life with the discipline, the commitment, the ability to work with other people and be an asset into the community. I think those are some of the most important things that high school football and sports in general can teach people.
If you could give advice to anyone with aspirations in sports media, what would you tell them?
You're going to miss an incredible amount of family functions, because if you think about it, sports is everybody's entertainment. So that means they're off. It's the weekends, it's the nights. If you're going to do this and you're going to do it well, you've got to give up a lot of your own time. You have to miss a lot of things. You're not going to make a lot of money in the beginning. Your hours are going to be insane. And if for one day you wake up and you don't have the passion, get out. Get out right away. Do something else. And I think one of the biggest things is, and I try to teach young kids this, is that while you can still be a fan, you can't be a fanatic. You have a job to do. And that's the most important thing. And while everybody thinks it's fun and it's exciting, and it is, look, I get paid to go to games, but there's a lot that goes into that. You know, people, they see the half-hour show and it's like, oh wow, that's pretty cool, good job. And it is, it's a great job. Other than being a coach or a teacher, I think I have the second best job in the world, I really do. But if you lose the passion, if you think you're gonna make a lot of money right away, and if you think you're just gonna work a couple hours, it's really not the business that you should be in. There's a lot of time that goes into it. We work 6 days a week to put that half-hour show on the air. So there's a lot of time that goes into that.
Right, so you have to be very committed. It's not all glamour.
No. It's not all glamour, and but it is fun. You know, when you can put, like a good buddy of mine, Bill Ganillo from News 12 right here in Norwalk, passed away a couple weeks ago. And 44 years old, just an unbelievable person. And we were talking, it was Friday night, September 14th, it was the season opener in Connecticut. And we were talking up at the Bridgeport Central Greenwich High School football game at Kennedy Stadium in Bridgeport about Emmys and stuff like that. And, you know, awards mean nothing. They really don't. But I said to him, you know, Billy, when you can put a smile on somebody's face because of something you've done, that's all the award that you need. That's all the award that you need. So you don't do it for awards, you don't do it for glory, you do it to make people feel good. And you know, and you got to get a paycheck too. So you work hard and you hope they keep having you back.
That's important as well.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Let's turn our attention to the national perception of high school sports. You know, with more attention on high school sports today, how do you think it's affecting not only the high school game, but also how it's affecting the student athlete?
My biggest concern is that the national media is going to go overboard and try to get multiple high school games on TV. And that does scare me, because I've made a policy where, and we talked about this before, high school basketball has gotten out of control. There's just so much sense of entitlement, everything like that. I've made a policy on our show that we will not feature freshmen and sophomores on our show, because I don't want to be a part of the problem. Now, if we're out at a game and a 9th or 10th grader does well in a game and that's part of the storyline, we'll do an interview. But we're not going to go to the school following them around. I do worry about that, especially with the internet. There's a lot of stuff on. It is a concern that you don't exploit the high school, and that's one thing that I don't think that we do. We have had a lot of people say, well, why don't you do more games of the week? Well, Erica, you know what? Here's the deal. You want to do just as many as you do and want the public to want more, because then you know you have a strong product. I hope we don't oversaturate the market with just so much scholastic sports.
Right. So you leave them wanting more.
Absolutely. You leave them wanting more. Yeah.
Okay. And of all the teams and the players you've covered, what's the best team you've ever covered, and who's been the most talented player that you've seen?
Best team I ever covered, 2003. This is football. Don Bosco Prep. They have a kid, Brian Toll, greatest high school football player I've ever covered, played for his dad. He's up at Boston College now. The quarterback of that team, Mike Teals, the quarterback at Rutgers University, 5th in the nation in passing efficiency. That was the best team I ever covered. The second best team I ever covered, 1998, Bergen Catholic. Their starting defense only gave up 3 touchdowns. And the third best team I ever covered, the 1986 Trumbull High School football team. They had everything. They had a kick game, punt game, quarterbacks, big tight ends, Mark Allen. That was the third best high school football team I've ever covered. Basketball, it's simple. The 1989 St. Anthony's basketball team in Jersey City, New Jersey, 4 kids on that team went on to become professional basketball players. So that is that's a simple one. Yeah, that's a simple one.
Well, this has been great. Unfortunately, it looks like we're about out of time.
No, not a problem.
But today we got to meet, or we got to look into the rapidly growing world of high school sports, and we were privileged to talk with an expert in the field here in the tri-state area. I'd like to thank Mike for joining us. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Anytime, Erica.
And we hope you enjoyed this edition of Person to Person, and hope you tune in again next time. Have a good day.
Now, does this air within the school, or does it go?
This has been a Norwalk Community College student production.